Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of Don't Talk If You Don't Know, the unofficial, official podcast dedicated to all things high-level team fight tactics in North America. But today, we have a very special episode because DTIYDK goes global, because we have Sherman from Riot Games joining us here to talk about the past, the present, and the future of TFT Esports. But first, let's go ahead and welcome everybody to the show properly. First, my co-host, as always, Bryce, Esports Law Brum. Bryce, welcome back to the States. Good to see you. It feels like we haven't really actually seen you much in 8.5 in Monsters Attack, so I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah, it's really good to be back. You said as always, but I've been on an extended hiatus. We did sneak in one episode, I guess. But yeah, I haven't played this at all. It's the first time I've taken a break from TFT since set 1. I wasn't able to cast regionals this year because I didn't. I had this trip planned, and then I wasn't invited to cast Worlds. So it was like, okay, nice, take a break, and I'm like itching to get back. I am so ready for the PBE to come out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for set 9.
Oh yeah, that's right. You look very properly toasted by the sun. This man went outside, everybody. Point and
so
laugh.
Much grass. It's hard to touch more grass than a golf trip.
Speaking of pointing and laughing, we have one of the biggest comedians in TFT. We want to talk about the past, present, future of TFT Esports. Why not have one of the funniest, well-spoken, and most direct and honest players out there to represent the player base? We got Milk. Welcome to the show, man.
Oh, I just want to say, first of all, since you hyped me up, dude, when you introed, I think you have so much charisma as a host. I was actually really surprised by like how good of a host you are.
Wait, how are you surprised at this point?
He's so for years.
I don't know, every time, like literally, that was my first thought when he was like just like doing his intro speech.
No, it's funny you say that because I think that all the time when we're in the middle of a podcast and it'll come up with like a really smooth transition or like on broadcast. I'm like, damn, he's fucking good, man. He's really good.
Jordan is actually like the best for me. But yeah, I've also been on break and I've also just been touching grass. But I'm also like really excited to come back to TFT and like start grinding set 9 and 10 again.
Okay, well, hopefully, I'm glad to hear that, first of all, Milk, but hopefully Sherman also has been in the weeds of TFT and not taking a break. Sherman, welcome to the show. You've been hard at work, but before we dive into like what you're doing and, you know, what's to come, talk to us about like, you know, who you are and your background and what you actually do for people who have never heard or seen you before.
Yeah, I was going to say real quick, like in the weeds, I actually just got back from China to see the TOC finals for set 8. So also going through like not quite full jet lag. I've amazingly like skirted off I slept through the night ever since I got back, but been a whirlwind of TFT as we get ready for the set championship in a few weeks. But for those who don't know me, I'm Sherman. I've been at Riot for actually 9 years now. I started as an intern back in 2014 as a college community intern. And really helped build out a lot of what we did in the college scene for League of Legends. So going from just students running sort of tournaments and events on campus to kind of managing our college championship and the way that athletic conferences or the universities were officially supporting League of Legends and trying to help kind of build a lot of the structure and support so that League could really have a strong foothold in the college esports space. And then I spent 2 years after that leading marketing and publishing for the LCS. I really wanted to move over from college esports over to pro esports and found a really cool opportunity. Helped like work on the rebrand that the LCS went through a few years ago. Kind of some of the content, working some of the new content kind of vision that's really kind of come to fruition over the last couple of years. But then I took a role about a year ago now called Global Head of Organized Play, which is sort of like esports, but for non-League and Val. And so it's like almost like more emerging esports. So I oversee Legends of Runeterra, Teamfight Tactics, and I'm also thinking about future games like Project L.
Okay, so you got a lot on your plate. I like to hear that experience because it seems like you have a really strong on-the-ground view of esports from the very basic amateur level all the way to the professional level. And I feel like that's a really big part of TFT esports in general, which is the aspiration to pro. So many people talk about like, when's TFT going to get their own like Valorant Masters or League LCS? But I feel like that path to pro, that aspirational dream is a really big part of TFT. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we talk a lot about the approachability of like competing in TFT. Not saying that like anybody could just, even as like a silver player, like coin flip their way to winning a set championship, but it is a game that's like, how many times in NA have we seen a player win a cup or even regionals that like, this is our first time seeing a player. And I think that being able to have that in TFT is a necessary superpower of the esport. Like, it really needs to have room for players to really like sink the time in a set and kind of have that meteoric rise within a short amount of time. And so it's been really cool to like be able to take a lot of those learnings from sort of like the college, the amateur, and junior side, and also apply that with like my experience on the LCS team, and kind of help shepherd that. And I'm also a big TFT player. Like, I was a big auto chess player before TFT came out, with like really good friends with the team that went on to go build the first version of TFT. When TFT, the week it came out, I was sick. I swear I was sick.
Yeah,
like,
Sure. Yeah, me too.
I sat at the PC and played 100 games, and just like, I'm pretty sure that's why I ended up being sick for like 2 weeks straight. But I like did nothing but grind to diamond when the game first came out, and so it was cool to actually jump into this as like someone with a lot of that experience at a variety of levels in esports, but also as like someone who's sunk thousands of hours now into playing TFT.
Nice.
One of us, love it. So a lot of what you were talking about, Sherm, is how you started to think about TFT esports, and a lot of what you described is kind of what makes it different than something like Val or League. When you're trying to think what it's more alike to, does your brain go to esports, or does it go outside of the esports world entirely? Like, what are the analogs when you're kind of thinking about how you frame up your job and kind of what TFT competitive ought to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of good comparisons out there, especially like in the strategy game like space. Like, let's look at Magic the Gathering and sort of their whole ecosystem. I think that there's a lot of even the way that we're set up today, there's a lot of similarities in the way that we kind of like elevate players into events, and then we use events to qualify players onto these next phases. So there's sort of having that sort of circuit system is not dissimilar to what I would call like some esports adjacent spaces. Even within the esports space, I think like fighting game community is probably like more similar to TFT than I would say like Val or League. Just in the approachability, also the community, like the connection between the community. I think that the gap of like when you become a pro TFT player and when you're just like a community member competes in events is like pretty narrow, almost hard to like distinguish. And I think that that's pretty similar to the fighting game community as well.
Interesting. Milk, from your player experience, do you feel like a lot of what Sherman says makes sense to you from the participation aspect of it? Because you've been there since the beginning. You're actually a set 1 OG. A lot of people coming from set 2 and onwards. You've been there from the very beginning.
Like the percentage, I feel like more people playing and like coming up. Okay, so like what motivated a lot of people to grind hard this set, and I think that's why a lot of like newer names came up to regionals. Like a lot of players told me like that Summit was like their drive, because like they saw Summit, like how fun it was, and like a lot of like the mid challenger people told me that they were like going to try hard this set so that they could go to like stuff like that in the future.
I think Summit was this perfect like example of what I mean when I talk about like the community sense of and like the connection to the community that exists within TFT. I don't think like Summit was definitely not this like mega high production event. It was more about being able to bring players together to like celebrate an awesome time as like a community of high level players. At the same time, there was like this, there was this big tournament at the center of like creating that sense. And so I think that it's like Summit is a great example of some of the things that I think also help distinguish us. And I think like the fact that it's a single player game also enables you to have these cool events that, it doesn't take hours to get through just 2 teams playing a best of series. And so like TFT enables you to have like these like different and fun formats.
Great. So now I think a lot of the conversation that we've had is establishing what TFT Esports is, what the current system is encouraging, and also some of the highlights like Summit. But, we're not here just to give you nice, easy fastballs down the middle, Sherm. So I'm going to toss you a question, and then I'm going to ask Milk to respond to it and follow up, okay? So the question is, what do you think the current system is weak at, and what is it lacking, and what needs to be done moving forward, in your opinion? So, Sherm, you go first, and I want Milk to follow up afterwards.
Yeah, I'll speak really from a global point of view on this, which is I do think that the current system lacks a lot of consistency in a way that's a weakness to the overall scene. And I say that when I look at how we're structured globally, every region there's not a single region that is a copy of another region. And I think that's I think there is value in regional differences, but I also think that in a phase where TFT is still so immature as an esport, it means that it's really hard to understand what's going on around the world. So something that seems like having one form, even something is close to from a language perspective, North America and Europe have vastly different formats, and the barrier to communicate that to competitors or to players and fans is really hard, especially with what I would consider are limited publishing channels and marketing channels for TFT. I think that those are still pretty immature for both the game and the esport. And so I think that when I look at how different we are globally, I don't know that that's the best thing. And so part of that means we have to take from other regions what we think is working and help kind of share a lot of learning. But I also think it means how can we create some more consistency globally so that it's easier to onboard as a fan, or the work that we do as a global esports team can trickle down more to the regions and give regions more tools at their disposal to make it easier to onboard fans. I think the second is I do think that we don't do we want to make competing in TFT far more approachable. And I think that part of that is everything from how many players can compete in different events. I think that that's a factor of it. I also think of what are the different tools available for online tournament organizers to run their own TFT events. And also for players to also have things directly in game. So I think that this is, I think that all of those combined sort of we're so different globally, and we want to head towards a direction that makes competing more approachable for players.
Okay. So just to recap, it's really disconnected. There's a lot of regions doing their own things, and it feels like there's no common thread tying, and the others is making it accessible for a bunch of people to want to participate. All right, Milk, what do you think about what he's saying? And then also I want to hear from you what you think are some of the things that are weak in TFT Esports.
Oh, the things that are weak? Oh, okay. I guess my current complaints, I would say, is the first half of the set doesn't really matter, but that's getting fixed with set 10 in the future. I guess another thing is there's only one international event per year, which is basically Worlds. That's the only one that matters.
It's 2 per year, right? It's 1 per set.
1%.
Yeah. I guess also the fact of being no lands currently, because I feel most emotions are shown when people players have cameras on. Soju shouldn't be able to be crying and just turn off camera. You should be able to see that and just have more memories, because they're not being lands. I don't remember that much about set 5 or set 6 for me personally, just because it wasn't recorded. I kind of regret that a little bit. So I guess more lands. Also, it's more things for the organizers to have events. Currently you can't even do double up custom mode either on the 20 realm or on the client. So I guess stuff like that is pretty simple to do. And I actually hope there's more things for team formats, because I think it's actually a really good format. Yeah.
And what do you think about what Sherm said, Milk, out of curiosity? Or actually, Sherm, go ahead. You can weigh in on that first. Go for it.
No, yeah, I was gonna say I wholeheartedly agree. Even just from a couple of things that stood out to me. I do think LAN is sort of a big piece that's missing, and just in general, a indication of what the TFT community looks like around the world. I don't think the story of TFT is it was this awesome, incredible game that came out of nowhere in June 2019. Yeah. And then 8 months later, the world shut down. And if I was to ask someone to send me a picture of more than 20 TFT players in a room, I think people would struggle to find that image. And I think that's like I think that makes the community even not feel as big and rich and vibrant as it actually is, to not have that sort of like those moments that bring players together physically. So I definitely agree on that front. And then as well, I think like trying to figure out how we can bring better tools to like, I don't think Riot needs to be able to organize everything. Like Tournament Realm's great for Riot to be able to run Riot events and customs, but like being able to think about like, I would love for customs to be enabled on live so that like, even right now, I know players are scrimming for Worlds, and they don't have, because of the portals enabled on normal queue, it's like they don't have a good option. So I think it's like really trying to solve, there's like a lot of gaps in technology that we need to help solve to really help like grow the scene overall.
Okay. And then kind of what Bryce was asking Milk, which is, what do you think about what Sherman was just saying even before that in terms of like what he thinks is lacking?
Like the more accessible to more people. I feel like TFT could have a thing like, Clash for like a built-in client, something like that for TFT, where they can like potentially like qualify into like another tournament, I guess, something like that.
In-game tournaments.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're saying that like Clash results would qualify you into something. Is that what you're saying? Like an open bracket kind of format?
Yeah, if you want like include like everyone. That's what I thought like he was saying.
Or Champions Queue. People have suggested Champions Queue in the past equivalent.
I think like champion. I mean, that's effectively what China's running today with the TOC super server. Is it's a really short 2-week period. But like I think this set they had 10,000 players competing in that under that system, and actually like a majority of players in the final lobby for the TOC finals ended up coming from that super server. So like it's not just like a cool thing for 2 weeks. It's also doing a really great job at providing high level players.
Yeah.
All right. So we talked about some of our thoughts and maybe some of the things that are lacking. Is there any questions that we have directly for Sherman in terms of maybe the overarching vision? I guess I'll go first. So Sherman, what do you think is the ultimate goal for something like TFT Esports? Like what are something that's really good? Because people look at viewership, right? They come to the main broadcast, they're like, man, Soju from North America gets more viewers, or Sean's from France gets more viewers, right? Like, why are we having this main broadcast? And then they just start going and complain. But like, it doesn't. Is that important to you guys? Is that what the actual deliverables and metrics that you guys are judging your success upon? Like, what actually makes a successful TFT esports scene? So that way, we're not like, oh my god, everything's gonna fail because our numbers aren't going crazy with the 6 digits plus.
Yeah, I think what good looks like for TFT is like something that really helps celebrate the game and build up the game to its highest potential. And I do think, like full candidness, I think one of the best success metrics for doing that is viewership. When Riot Esports organization is best set up to capitalize on a product that has high viewership. I mean, that's like, we have a great sales and business development team, and their ability to actually build something for TFT does require, viewership for the game. Where that viewership comes from, I believe in this like very big multi-channel experience for TFT. I think like, if you want to go watch through your favorite player's perspective, like let's make sure that that's available. If you want to watch through a co-streamer, that should also be available, or a main broadcast. And I think all of those kind of need each other in order to be successful as a whole. And I think that we're definitely looking at like the full landscape for that. We do think that the pathway for growing that is actually more rooted in participation, giving players more individual connections to the scene that they engage with by being a competitor themselves, and being able to celebrate and understand like kind of what the TFT community is about. And so I think a lot of our initiatives are really thinking about how to like really put that approachability into the scene, and using that. And again, that's where like the fighting game community analogy comes in. I think like I've definitely heard things like poker as a good analogy, and I'm not like the greatest or the most read up on the poker community, but I do know that the fighting game community has like a bigger sense of camaraderie and like partnership and like raising up individual players. And I think that actually like does a really great job of summarizing like the the direction that we want to go. And so I think we think that viewership's important. We think that like participation is actually the thing that's going to drive most people to want to engage. And we think that the game is approachable enough, whether it's the fact that we're like able to run set champion, like we're qualifying as right now. I think we just finished the Western LCQ. So a player just qualified and will compete in a set championship next week. I think that's like unheard of in most other esports, and so it's definitely something we still want to be able to lean into. And then I think the last like aspirational piece that's like, is how can we better connect what we do in esports to the actual like cyclical nature of the game. So like great example, right now we're getting ready to do our set championship. It's at the very end of the set. This is like potentially your favorite set you've ever played. And in just a few weeks, the set's going away. And like esports can help serve in this case as sort of like a send-off to your favorite set and like celebrating the thing that you like have really come to enjoy for the last 6 months. It's also perfectly positioned to introduce you to your next favorite set. And so I think over time we're trying to figure out how to like better connect them. We're not quite there yet, but it's definitely something where we're thinking about how do we celebrate the beginning and end of sets more through esports.
Okay. So just to summarize, so it's viewership, participation, and basically advertising. What you described is like it's something that's like a really powerful vehicle to help celebrate the community, commemorate what's going on, also show you what's the next to come. Bryce, that sounds, I mean, pretty spot on with what everyone's expectations are.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think one thing fans often are disconnected from is like, what are the incentives of a publisher? You really have to think about those incentives a lot more broadly than I think a lot of people tend to think about this stuff. And I think one of the things that's really cool about TFT is it is a lot different than your other games. And there is no forged path for this. We have to kind of experiment a little bit and figure it out. And that's part of what made something like the summit feel so special, is that it was different, really different, and it was a first crack at a bunch of different things that were different. It was like a LAN that also had like a lot of for fun stuff involved. It was a tournament that was serious but not too serious. It was the teams format. Like, we're throwing a lot of different stuff at that event, right? Yeah. And I think a lot of it all really worked together, and that's what made it feel so special, and why I think, to Milk's point earlier, it changed perspective of a lot of kind of casual or mid-core players. I think is probably a more apt description of where they fall relative to some of the hardcores. And that's to kind of tie it all together with some of the analogies you were using, Sherm. So poker, I think where poker really is a strong analogy relates to kind of the complexion of the player base almost. You've got your hardcore pros full-time. Everyone knows going into a tournament these are the best players. But you've got this huge group of people that play poker pretty seriously. And there's enough variance in poker that if you kind of play really well in a given moment and have a little bit of variance go your way, you can stand toe to toe with the best. You can win the World Series of Poker, you can win whatever, right? These marquee events. And that's kind of how TFT feels too. Like, obviously if every TFT tournament were 1,000 games on a patch that everyone had played for a week, like, guys like Dish Soap are probably going to dominate, right? Like, it's just too much, but you can't possibly run a TFT tournament that way. It's actually impossible to make the format even remotely compelling and increase the sample size enough where there's not going to be some material variance involved. And I think that's what makes like poker tournaments feel special. It's an anybody can win dynamic, and TFT, that's very, very similar. Whereas fighting game is like the community that we're talking about in terms of the community feel. Fighting games are so skill expressive that like you go in and
totally.
It's not just skill expressive, it's that there's a utter lack of variance to them that makes it so like you go in knowing like even if you're a good mid-core player, you have no shot against the best, right? They're gonna make you look real foolish. And so TFT is this beautiful hybrid of these two things, but that also means we don't know exactly the best way to tackle like increasing engagement for the game and viewership for the esports product and all this stuff.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think it's, I think on the incentives note, I think that's a really interesting one. I think that like for TFT, it's definitely not like crystal clear on, or I don't think it's always very obvious the way that a publisher thinks about it. I think even like you mentioned marketing or advertising, and it's like for the most part, it's really, in that case, it's like we're trying to serve the fan base that's just really involved and like cares about the game. I think that's like the big thing. TFT Esports is not like a new player acquisition funnel. It is absolutely a like, hey, there's a massive player base around TFT. Create things that help celebrate and build moments and help celebrate community and build up the scene. That has a ton of fantastic benefits to the game. And then it's funny too, you know, I mentioned I work on Project L. Like, as you said, the fact that this is such like a new type of game, you know, there's so many sponsors who have reached out and are like, we really want in on Project L. And I'm like, that's a game that's not even out. No one knows what to do. Like we're excited for it, but it's well understood. Like Riot's working on a fighting game. You know, like that's maybe something that we want to get involved in. Whereas like TFT, we are constantly building and rebuilding a like education slide of like, what is TFT? How does it work? How does esports for it function? And you have to really teach the market all those different pieces. So it's definitely like a unique challenge in this game.
I think it's worth noting really fast before Dan kind of shepherds us along to the next topic that what you were talking about in terms of the marketing value of TFT Esports being primarily targeting the already highly engaged players. It does that for sure, and I think that's a huge part of all esports. In fact, actually, is that's really the primary audience they're speaking to. It's really hard. Like Johnny even talked about it in his article about, you know, esports more generally and how they're thinking about that. You know, Riot experiment with like noob streams for League of Legends, it's just not that effective. There aren't that many people that really want to engage with it in that way. If you're at that status in your league journey, you're probably not going to be an esports fan. You're going to get there if you keep kind of moving up the rung. But the point I want to make, actually, to return to the poker analogy, is anyone here know the single greatest event in the history of poker from a marketing perspective?
When Chris Moneymaker won?
Exactly, when Chris Moneymaker won. You guys aren't poker players, but you know that because it's a story that hit the heart of like the competitive gaming community more broadly, and it's like it was a huge turning point for poker, where all these people who had played very casually at some point, someone, you know, the equivalent of someone who played TFT 10 times, right, over the whole course of all of the sets, and now all of a sudden some nobody makes an incredible run, a miracle run, and wins. And it certainly helped that his name was Moneymaker, and yeah, that had a profound so it's a really interesting kind of historical note for poker. We haven't had that moment in TFT, but it is a game that is capable of something like that happening for sure. And if it does, it'll be a really cool story to tell, and I think it'll have a profound impact on the game itself.
Do you agree with that?
I think we saw it.
I don't think that's not possible for TFT, because you have to be like somewhat competitive to like qualify to Worlds to win.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no, right? Like, think about the people who qualified for the World Championship from North America last set, right? Like, you know, Rainplosion and Kyvix are two players that are not, they're both very good players. They are not full-time players. They're doing other things, and they're trying to get prepared with a fraction of the amount of time that you guys commit when you're playing it full-time hardcore. And these are things that, like, there's this distinction with TFT between like the people who are full-time and people who are very good, might be a known name, will have popped off in tournaments. But like Rainplosion, in the lead up to that, she was a complete unknown commodity, and all of a sudden she was competing on the world stage and doing it quite well at that, right? She was the best finisher for North America. If she wins Worlds, Milk, which is very within the realm of possibility, that is actually like pushing in that direction. It's not, you know, it's not like Moneymaker had literally never played poker before. He encouraged those people who had never played poker before to do it, but these are people who've been playing poker for decades, right? And just happened to get their shot.
Yeah.
My opinion on that is like, I don't think it matters that, like, it won't have that much of an impact on TFT, like on who wins, in my opinion, on like for like game growth. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think game growth isn't, but like I think like community engagement. Like I think Soju is a great example of this. Like the amount of excitement from a broader TFT community when they saw Soju make Worlds last set, I think was an example of like the power that like an individual player who can bring to like the storyline of the game. You know, I think North America would have had a big moment if Soju had won. And I think like that's something that I don't know many players around the world that could replicate that same sort of excitement and story for their region.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm gonna just close it here because I feel like we can continue to kind of talk about what we want, what analogies I think TFT Esports can ultimately be likened to. But I want to focus on the future, right? Because we talked a lot about some of the past and the current present. Let's talk about the future of TFT Esports, which is ultimately what we have Sherman here to do. Not just talk about all of our grievances and our problems and things that we want. So what is in the books? I'm just gonna ask you straight point blank. What's in the books for the future of TFT Esports, Sherm?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but at a high level, our approach is definitely evolving to figure out how we can grow the participation angles and the ways that players can get involved in the scene. And so I think that can take a variety of approaches, from like more grassroots events to like restructuring regional events to be more inclusive, to even taking directions like Milk brought up earlier, where like, what does in-game tournaments look like and how can that connect to the broader scene? I think all of those are on the table in the direction that we're heading. And, you know, nothing is going to like happen or magically change overnight. But I think that as you, in a couple of years, as you're looking back at a lot of the decisions we're going to make for TFT Esports, you're going to see a lot of that trend come through. And so I think I think that's why we're excited to be unveiling a new type of event this December. Ferdinand, I don't know if you want me to jump straight into what that is going to be.
I mean, unless you want to. So, I mean, I feel like we're dancing around it, so we might as well just go straight into it.
Let's do it, man.
Let's just jump into it. So, what's the big announcement, Sherm?
All right. So, this December 8th through 10th, we're going to host our first global LAN event for TFT.
Ooh.
It's going to be at the very beginning of set 10. In fact, only 3 weeks into the new set.
Oh.
And it is going to feature 512 players competing in Vegas over 3 days.
Wait,
oh
you're
my
gonna fly
God!
512 people to Vegas?
A World Series of TFT is actually happening.
Oh
What the
my
heck?
God!
It's like okay. I have so many questions.
Oh
my
God!
First question is that it's open for everybody to participate? Is it like open sign up?
So we will be doing like open registration for this event. So we'll be selling competitor passes for players to be able to compete. We will do like, we're working on the mechanics right now for like giving preferential treatment for like high level players to have like pre-sale, can you get a pre-sale window as a challenger player? We're working out all of those logistics right now. But the vision is that we want to, over the course of 3 days, we'll have 512 players who have like signed up, gotten themselves to Vegas to like compete in this massive tournament. Over 3 days, we will get down to one player, only 3 weeks into a brand new set.
Wow. All right, I want Milk's reactions right now. He's kind of been out the gate looking on.
Honestly, I think that's like too many people for a 3-day event, because like, I guess it's cool and it's fun, but for like the more competitive side than me, I guess it's like 3 days, 500 people. It's gonna be like a very high variance. Yeah.
I think that's like fair. I do think like part of the vision for the reason we have that many competitors is I think that the storytelling of the event will have a little bit of that, like who came up through the ranks, but it is definitely like there is definitely more variance in that type of format. I think from the get-go, we've talked about this as like, we want to be sure that we're building something that isn't just like competing with a set championship to prove who has mastered the set. So I think instead this is like way more, you've had your hands on the set for just like a short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
And what have you picked up? Are you able to bring like a new meta to the set on your own to the event? And are you able to like capture and adapt to like what's played in this massive field? But we'll play like over 300 games in just those 3 days.
That's pretty wild.
Do you know where you're doing it, Sherm?
Yes, we are doing this at the MGM Grand Conference Center in a massive ballroom over the course of 3 days. We'll have a ton of like TFT setups, so it won't just be like rows of PCs. It will be like, here's your table of 8, and you will get to sit with the other people in your lobby and sort of
so it's kind of like being at a poker table, like you won't be
Yeah.
That's
I actually really like this event because it's actually like
cool.
It's basically like TFT Con, where everyone just meets with each other and like just has fun. It's like I don't think it's like that serious, right?
Even if you don't want to play in the tournament, you're gonna want to be there.
All your friends are gonna be there, so it's just like TFT Con to meet all your friends and just have a good time.
So let's talk about like maybe I loved hearing conversation around the summit and sort of what that did for the competitive community, because like the summit took so many. I think Bryce and Ferdinand have both talked about this like need for like novelty as an example, something that is different, that creates like a different experience, but also is like a great entry point for like how to get involved and like excited about the scene. And I think that this event definitely has that sort of that opportunity to be this thing where you're like, I'm following because my favorite player managed to actually compete on LAN, or like, oh my God, like all of these people are going to be out there. I think you can also bring in a lot of the TFT adjacent players that like play a lot of TFT, but it's not necessarily the thing that they like do live and breathe 24/7. So I think it does a great job in really like celebrating and bringing together the entire TFT community.
That's great.
I think a lot of people would actually want to go to this because like over Summit, a lot of people paid for like their own flight and like hotels just to, like hang out with people. Because like I don't know. Also TFT people, a lot of them are like 25 to 30, so everyone has like money, I guess, to go to Vegas, and it's basically a TFT con where everyone just meets up each other and has fun. So I actually really like this.
Yeah. Vegas is not an accident in terms of
we go to Vegas a lot.
It's so much like the gamble.
It's even more. It's not the gamble. It's just the like the built-in entertainment of like the whole city, no matter what you choose to do. So it really does. It's like a great place to actually host this type of event. And so I would say it's super experimental for Riot. Like Riot has never run an open bracket event like this. And so it's definitely
paid enter, Sherm. That's new as well.
Yeah, paid entry.
Right?
Does it go to the prize pool?
You know the entry fee yet?
We're not quite ready to talk details about
higher to better.
Business. What was that?
Higher to better.
I don't want to talk about. Very candidly.
I already know 5 told people that will sign up to this.
Really?
Look, I think that our hope is definitely that like, you know, we release passes and then they're gone, and then we can move on to focusing on the event, and we're not spending a bunch of time
recruiting
about
people.
How to market passes. So there's definitely you know, a lot of like I don't want to talk about price because we're still nailing that down, actually like getting ready to do some research and better understand like what the right price point is and factoring in the differences all around the world to figure that out. We do want this to be a global event, so you know, while because of its location in North America, it probably means there's a lot of NA players where it's more accessible this time around. And as we like, our hope is that in the future, this is like a very successful event and it could go elsewhere in the world. But for now, we're definitely like, it's very experimental for Riot. Want to try something out that's not what players are used to from Riot.
Wow. I mean, that's hopefully it does go well, because then, you know, I'm getting a little bit of Magic, Magic Pro Tour vibes, where it's like the set launches big promotional event and maybe goes on tour. That'd be really cool. Did we talk about prize pool? Is there something that kind of you ready to establish as a baseline?
No, I think it's also in that camp of like we want to figure out entry fee costs.
Can you say if you're considering the notion of Riot adding to the prize pool, right? Is your anticipation that the entire prize pool comes from the entry fees, or is it supplemented in some way?
No, I think that we're expecting to supplement some amount of it, and like figuring out how we want to make sure that it does feel like you're putting something in and getting something out in like some regard. And then I also think like supplementing even like what's included in your entry fee, like what are you getting that you're like guaranteed to walk away with. I think like our hope is just in general for this event to be something that like players walk away with like, yes, like a slew of incredible memories, similar to what Summit did for so many players, of just like being this thing that they will always remember within their time in TFT. And then also like being able to walk away with like saying you placed top 256, or like you know, just making it through the first round for half the players in the field is going to be like this big feat. Being able to celebrate each of those milestones along the tournament is going to be a big goal of ours in the way that we actually build it out.
Can you say staking is on the table. There's a topic that came up a few months ago in TFT, right? It's an interesting, for those of you who aren't familiar, the idea of staking is basically getting action from a player. So in a poker tournament, you would front a portion of their buy, and you'd be therefore entitled to a certain portion of their rewards. Is that something that's on the table? Thinking about what's the current status there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on like the framing. I think like as an example, a team picking up a player and footing the bill for a player to compete. If they want to say, if part of that team agreement happens to be that like they keep the prize pool, which is like you probably know. That's always a leverage or a negotiation point. I don't think it's actioned on very often, but like it's been on the table.
It's actioned on a lot in Dota specifically. outside of Dota, but every Dota player negotiates like they're going to win the international, so you really care about those prize money percentages.
Yeah. So I think that's like reasonable. I also think we want to like release tickets and everything early enough that like if a streamer wants to like set their goal of like what their like donations and everything are going to, less staking, but more just like being able to say like, hey, you're helping fund my trip to Vegas for the event. So, there's probably like, I don't want to get super narrow. There's probably versions of staking that are like bad and like not on the table. And then there's definitely versions of this that are like in spirit that are fine.
All right, Milk. I want to hear some questions from you as well. Get it all out.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I'm actually like really excited for this because I feel like it's more like a for fun event, right? Because 5 to 12 people.
Was Summit for fun?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was for sure for fun. Okay. But like 5 to 12 people, 3 days in TFT especially, that means you're probably not going to play too many games, and it's gonna be like really fast if you want to do it in 3 days with that many people, all like in real life.
Yeah, I think our hope is definitely that like players look at the final lobby and say that this is one of the most competitive lobbies that we will see globally in set 10. But I think I think however players want to like choose to classify it, we're definitely attempting to like make the stakes feel valuable enough that also like high level players and like have an entryway to make sure that the competition is very high level. And so there's some shortcuts to get through 512 players in 3 days, absolutely. But like our emphasis is making sure that like this is still a top competitive event at the end of the day, even if it's not like the level of competition you might see at a set championship, which I think is like we currently go through months and months of competition to establish the level that's happening there. And so it's definitely taking a different approach.
And that's not changing, right? I'm guessing this is completely isolated. It's its own separate event. There's no points or qualification. And then set championship, that's staying. It's going to be its own closed or separate system from what you're describing.
Yeah, I think set champ, like nothing is happening to set 9. We're still going to have our set 9 championship. Set 10 and beyond, with the evolution to 3 sets a year, like we're still in that like conversation of what does the calendar look like. Okay. There are some challenges with like the set 10 set as an example because of it having the holidays right in the middle there. Sure. And then we come back to like just a short amount of time before the set is over. So we're still figuring out exactly how competition for the rest of set 10 is going to look, but like the rest, yes, like set championships are here. They're not necessarily going anywhere, and we're just still. I don't want to commit to anything on like we're figuring out how 2024 is going to work as a whole, like with the global ecosystem in mind.
One of the cool things with the change from the 0.5 sets to no 0.5 sets that doesn't get talked about a lot is that it gives you an opportunity to recalibrate the whole competitive calendar, right? Because you had a version of it that we had essentially kind of started to hone in on in the 0.5 version, and this is different. And to be honest, I think anyone who's watched a lot of competitive TFT for the last 2 years and watched the Summit would say that Summit's, if not their very favorite event, it's among. Part of that is because it was special, for sure. Part of that's also because it was very different from what else that exists out there. So it's exciting from my perspective. I'm just excited to see you can continue to experiment. Like I'm really excited about this format. I think it's going to be super fun. I agree with Milk that if you think of the Summit as for fun, this is going to probably lean in that direction. But the Summit was for fun, but like. That final lobby was really good. Yeah. It was super competitive. The team that won was 2 outstanding players. right? And so you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. I think if you get the right people in the room, the tough thing, I don't know how, probably over 200 people compete in a regional championship to qualify for their worlds, right? The world spot for whatever their region is. If you could somehow airdrop all 200 of them into Vegas for this event, we could guarantee the event is really good no matter who else signs up, right? But the question is, how many of the best players can we actually get to go to Vegas? Sure, but like I think we'll get a lot, basically a lot of them from NA, and I'll be really curious to see how it goes for other.
We already go to there for fun.
Yeah, we're going anyway.
We literally meet up there like for fun. So we're just gonna go anyways.
That's right.
Also,
sure.
I just want to say, like, I think this will, like, with 512 slots, I think this will motivate a lot of like the middle pack, like the GM. Like, a lot of people said at Masters Masters they don't care enough to get better. But like, if you can go to like an event that's like super fun, like you say maybe like sell the passes faster to like challenger players, so, like the people that don't even play the game can just like buy it or something. It'd be like really fun for like people to like have motivation to grind to GM or like to challenger. Yeah. So you can play it.
Absolutely. I think that's like the that's the next big time that you'll hear from us is like on this event is like talking more about like what the registration and everything is going to look like. And I think in the meantime, it's definitely like your set rank, your set 9 rank will matter. Even going seeding into the event, we'll use your set 9 rank.
Wait, set 9 end rank or?
Going into the event, set 9 end rank.
We'll probably snapshot it somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. We'll communicate.
Probably snapshot like 2 weeks before.
Yeah, right? They were trying to play PvE.
What about the for fun patch? Yeah, you don't want to snapshot on like the Big Bang Galaxy. Oh,
you could actually just snapshot on the final day of the World Championships. Not a bad way of doing it, and just saying like, hey, when Worlds ends, that's when.
Make them watch, man. Don't make them play.
As long as we communicate it. I think as long as we communicate it, that's everybody will take their cues from that.
Yeah. All right, really exciting stuff. We'd love to stay here forever talking about it, but I'm just gonna ask the next question, which is, when do you think we'll be able to hear more, and how will we hear more? Because if there's one thing I also gotta say, Sherm, this is probably actually going back to a previous topic, which is I feel like the communication, the advertising, the messaging is really hard to find. I feel like if anything, it's not even really that big of a joke to say that I find most of it from like Mortdog's Twitter or like random community members.
Totally. I think like expect to find a lot of it on the Teamfight Tactics website, like news and updates on this. We're definitely going to be vocal around like our social channels as we reveal more details. Expect like end of summer as like the next checkpoint on this. But I think we're really excited to kind of like get details out there, and I think for the most part, I do expect folks like you all in this room and more. No one's going to be shy about talking about this information. We're going to make sure everybody has it to the best of our ability, so that everybody can also serve as a great force multiplier of our reach on this. So we want to make sure everyone has the details and nothing feels like it's being missed. But I do expect the core competitive community to be all over this announcement within like the first 36 hours of this release going out.
Yeah.
That is dope. All right, well, I'm out of bullets. Bryce, Milk, any final questions before we wrap this up?
No.
More leaks, like, I don't know, future lands for regionals, future leaks for land for worlds.
Summit 2 confirmers.
Also, like, any team formats, because like I'm down to do 2 of these events a year. Also, one for solo, one for team event as well. Any more leaks? Also, any like player number leaks for TFT. I
think all I'll say is like, this is a big opportunity to help like chart the course of the future of TFT. I think we're going to take a ton of learnings from this and sort of like evolve a lot of our strategy based on what we learned from here. We have really high hopes for it. We also have some other cool stuff in the pipeline that hopefully at some point I'll be able to talk about. But like, I hope this, my hope is that this event and this announcement is sort of a signal of the direction. Like Riot is really invested in TFT. They really want to help continue to evolve the scene. The game's really healthy and vibrant, and we want to like continue to invest and grow that community.
You hear that, Milk? The scene is vibrant and healthy. Does that satisfy you?
Sure, I'll allow it.
Sure, can you talk about the size of the TFT team? How big is it today, and how big was it like a year ago, and how big was it 2 years ago, roughly?
I really don't want to quote it. I think the TFT team, the only reason is like TFT is like a really unique development model that is not replicated on any other game at Riot at this scale. We've kind of like been able to grow all around the world, like the number of people that are working on it. And so there's a lot of like, you know, we have a team in China that's helping build the game. We have folks like just in so many different offices that like the number is not like a concrete number like it would normally be of just like, here's how many people are in LA working on a game. But in my time, like I think the best indication is obviously this idea of like, we built enough people to start working on multiple sets at the same time. That's a big piece of the investment. And the cool thing about set 10 is it'll be the first set to kind of come out with that like framework in mind. So I'm also hoping for a very balanced launch patch because it'll be the longest set we've ever had. So I think like the team has done nothing but grow. And I think it's like, I think the cool thing about TFT, even just culturally, is it's internally at Riot, especially among leadership, is like so many people at Riot play TFT. It is the game easiest for like to work into to the like John Needham wakes up every morning and plays TFT as an example. My one-on-ones with him always start with talking about like what comps we're both playing right now. And I think that like game knowledge and like game passion in leadership has also helped drive a lot of excitement for like how do we invest and continue to grow TFT.
Awesome. Well, I guess we're really excited for set 10. We've been talking about it. I'm not sure how much you're aware, but basically everyone's saying set 10 is going to be the best set ever. Not that set 9 is going to be bad. It's just that everyone knows that set 9 is going to be great, but set 10 is going to be the best set ever.
I think set 9 is going to be also awesome. I just played it for the first time the other day.
Rub it in.
I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited to dive in.
All right. Well, let's get some final comments. So, Milk, Bryce. We'll start with Milk, and then we'll go to Bryce.
I'm actually really excited for set 10 because I think the biggest problem of TFT was like the half sets. And with this event, like I'm also really happy because I think there's actually, I don't know if people from Asia are going to be able to afford the plane ticket over, but it's really cool for NA players, I guess. And I'm actually just really excited for the future of TFT with like the new budgets for everything and like it being 4 months and just like everything in general for TFT.
Awesome. Bryce.
I am so excited about this event. I think the summit tested a whole bunch of things. This is testing a whole bunch of completely different things, but it's going to be really fun. I think it's going to be a huge success. I can't wait to find my way there, hopefully. And yeah, sure. Thanks. This was a real treat, man. Thanks for coming on the podcast, talking a little bit about your background, and giving us the opportunity to kind of talk about and react to this news in real time. It's not something that when Dan and I talked about launching the podcast, I didn't think we'd be here, but I'm really happy to be here. It's actually sort of an honor to like be part of the conversation around what's the bright future of TFT, and excited to see you guys do more cool stuff in the future.
Yep. And I think Bryce summed up really well. Thank you so much to Riot and, of course, Michael Sherman for hopping onto this podcast. I'm sure if you have follow-up questions, we put his handle right there. Maybe you can ask some clarifying details to some people who are really curious, because I know there's going to be many excited fans, not just about what's happening now with the imminent launch of set 9 as well as set 10, but also the future that you described, right, of learning from this and moving forward. This has been Don't Talk If You Don't Know, episode 25, the special presentation of the future of TFT Esports. Make sure to check out all of our channels, anchor.fm/DTIYDK or twitter.com/DTIYDK show. From Frodan, Bryce, Milk, and Sherm, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time for more TFT action.
Goodbye.